you potentially need more cash for an existing home that you need to renovate. But if you just buy an existing home that you don't need to renovate, that could be a positive thing. You might not need as much capital. So how to choose? Well, based on my experience, welcome back to the Homeseeker podcast. I'm your host, Blandon, your go-to source for mortgage advice on how you can achieve your home dreams. As a financial advisor, I've talked to thousands of people from buying their first home with a 5% deposit to someone who has 30 properties. I've personally invested in property myself, bought my first home, built a house. And today's topic is around whether or not you should consider buying an existing property versus if you should build a new house. I'm going to give you my insights and perspective based on my experience talking to thousands of people and my personal experience as well. And by the end of it, hopefully you can make a more informed decision whether to buy an existing house versus building a new house. I'm going to go over 3 positive things that if you buy a house, what is it going to be about? And then the cons to that as well. And then also on the other side, what are the positive and the negative of just buying an existing? So the 3 reasons to build. The first one is the equity uplift. What does this mean? Now, I've talked to a lot of homeowners that come to us that want to buy their second or third property, and that first house that they built, they usually, generally speaking, have made money. What I mean by that is whatever they paid for the build, they ended up with a higher valuation. This is what we call an equity uplift. So even if the market went down, if you're building a house, potentially because you are going to make some money by building and the market went down, you still break even. So you have a better margin of safety. Now, there are different ways of building a house. For example, if you're getting a home and land package, that's going to be slightly different than buying a house where you put in all the ingredients yourself. You get the architect to design the house, you might get another project manager to manage the construction, and you might get someone else to do interiors. This is kind of like buying a cheeseburger meal at McDonald's versus if you just make the cheeseburger yourself. So of course, there's going to be difference. If you buy the cheeseburger meal, everything is made for you. It's kind of like going to your signature home or GJ Gardner, they will do everything for you. You're not going to make as much on those versus if you just did everything yourself, potentially you'll make a bit more margin. But there's a caveat. Because if you don't know what you're doing, you could end up spending a lot more than just going to someone that will do everything for you. That is something that you need to be aware of. The second positive with building a new house is that you've got a brand new property. You're going to have less maintenance work. You don't have any renovations or repairs that you need to do. You're going to walk in the house and you're going to smell the new paint. Everything is ready to go. You're going to be a lot more comfortable. Your family, potentially the husband or wife, is going to be a lot happier. That's definitely a positive for me to build a new house. And the third is the customization, because if you're building your own house, you can still chop and change before you lodge the consent. Because part of the process, you've got to get the council to approve whatever you're designing. And during that process, you can change things. You can change the layout, you can change the floor plans, you can change material on the house. There's a lot more customization, so you can build your dream home on paper. Then you go and execute on it. Now, of course, there are downsides to building a new house. The first is what I've seen. People take a long time for their design because they want to get everything perfect. So that time factor is an opportunity cost because you spend a lot of time on this. You might miss out other things that you could do. Maybe if you bought an existing home and it went up in value, you can use the equity to buy another house. So time is a factor with building a house. Secondly, if you don't know what you're doing, again, it's very easy to spend too much. So this is what we call cost overrun. But the bank is usually quite good. They always add a margin in whatever you think you're going to spend. Customers are usually more optimistic in terms of how things are going to run in building a house. But the bank always add a margin in there, thinking that you might have extra things that will come up later that's going to cost you extra. And the third one is the stress. Now, if I ask 10 people who built their house, 8 of them are going to tell you or have told me that it was such a stressful process that they would never do it again. But most of them are very proud of, going through that journey. So although very stressful, they see it as worth it, but you need to be able to handle that stress. So it comes down to personal preference, whether or not you are someone that has got a high stress tolerance. So now buying and existing, what are the pros? Firstly, you don't have to wait. It's immediate availability. New builds could take anywhere from 12 to 2 years, sometimes even more if you're stuck in the design phase. Buying and existing, you could maybe move in a month, 2 months, 3 months. You can negotiate with the vendor on that side. Now, secondly, you can still get appreciated in an existing home, assuming you know what you're doing. because if you do enough market analysis, you can buy something that is below market value and add value to it by doing renovations or doing some creative renovations that is going to put more value in terms of rent, right? So this is things like extending a house. You might add another bedroom. You might add a minor dwelling or a tiny home that's going to increase the value of the house. So that is a positive for existing home as well, because you can still add value. The third is that if you're buying something that is on a freehold title, you usually have more land, and therefore the appreciate in the long run is going to be more than a house that is going to have less land. And the reason for this is because when you have a piece of land in a central area like Auckland, say for example Sandringham, and you have 800 square meters, chances are that house will be bulldozed in the future and you can put a block of apartment on that. And that is the reason why they will go up in value more so than something that has a smaller piece of land, because some developer might be able to give you a very good price for that. Now, of course, there are downsides for existing homes as well. First is the renovation challenge. Of course, if you don't know what you're doing, you might spend too much and overcapitalize as well. So homework is really important in this area, and you can buy property courses that's going to give you an understanding of what is a good amount of capital you should spend on renovations and how you should think about that. I've also got another video that talks about renovations in the channel, how you can think about it in terms of a logical standpoint. What kind of return should you get? You can check that out in the description. Secondly, you've got limited customization. The good thing about new build is that you can customize the whole thing if you're building brand new and designing the whole thing. Existing, you have to choose something that fits for your family. For some people, this is a good thing because they don't have to think as much, but limited customization, unless you're doing a massive renovation that you're stripping out walls and putting in a brand new kitchen and layout in the house. And lastly, if you are building a house, you might only have to put in 20% of the build costs. Whereas if you are buying a existing house, you are putting the 20% deposit up front for the initial house, and you might need to have cash for the renovations because the bank is not going to lend you money on the renovations unless you have more equity. So unless you're putting like 30% in, then you can use the 10% as renovations. So meaning you potentially need more cash for an existing home that you need to renovate. But if you just buy an existing home that you don't need to renovate, that could be a positive thing. You might not need as much capital. So how to choose? Well, based on my experience and what I've seen, even though clients have gone through this really stressful phase of building their own home, they usually have a better outcome. They have a house that they're very proud of. They put in a lot of blood and sweat into it, and they've built up their equity, right? If they built the house themselves, chances are the valuation of the house has gone up faster than someone who just bought an existing home that didn't really do as much market research, right? So if you didn't do as much market research, chances are that person who built a house will have more appreciation. And if I could go back with what I know now, I definitely build a house as my preferred choice. But there are key questions that you have to answer because firstly, you have to put your family through the stressful situation for the next 1 to 2 years. Above your family commitment, can you do this? Because you have to shift your focus from work. There are a lot of contractors and other things that you have to deal with. Even though I outsource a 4-bedroom build to a company, there is a lot of things that you still need to take ownership on. And that is the truth. You cannot just completely outsource it because no one will take more ownership than you because it's your money. So consider the stress and talk to a few people that have built a house and see if you can hack that stress. Second, what is your capital constraint? Because that will determine a lot of things. If you're buying an existing house, potentially you might get away with 10% deposit. Building a house, even though you can borrow maybe 85% on the build cost, you need to still have more cash just because you might have some cost overrun. So consider your capital and whether or not that is going to give the outcome that you want. And the third one, do you have the expertise or the team that you can trust? If you don't have the team that you can trust, then you better have the expertise because building a house is not an easy task. It's not just like some people think it's like drawing a stick house on a piece of paper. There's a lot that goes into it, dealing with council, thinking about design, not over-designing, not overspending, not just designing something that is going to add no end value to the next purchaser. Like those kind of things are really important when you're building a house because you're trying to get everything perfect, but not everything that you think is perfect is going to be perfect for the next buyer. So having the right team to guide you in terms of design, financing, construction phase, dealing with the council, those are really important. And if you say yes to all of them, you've got lots of capital, you can deal with the stress, and you've got a good team or expertise, then maybe building a house is for you. And of course, I've got a disclaimer, this is not personalized advice. If you need more personalized advice, then talk to a financial advisor. Again, thank you for tuning in to the Homeseeker podcast. If you find value, all I ask for is one thing, and that is to share this episode with one other person that's going to benefit from it. Now, every home buying journey is unique. So don't try to do this on your own. Get an expert on your side. And that's what wealthhq and Mortgage HQ will be able to help you with. Until next time, happy house hunting, and I'll talk to you again.